Hello, everybody, and welcome to our class today. In today's mini lecture, we are going to be building on the readings that you did for today, but not covering specific details from those readings. Now, you do still need to make sure that you have understood the content and worked through all the best practices in your reading from Chapter 10 today and your reading from Rhetorical Act. Do still make sure that you have worked through those. But this mini lecture will be building from there, taking those and putting them together into a specific concept that's important to this class, but isn't covered as thoroughly as I'd like in your textbook readings. So please make sure that you've done that reading yourself, because today's mini lecture is going to focus on our different forms of public speaking. So as your textbook notes, there are four primary forms of public speaking: the manuscript, the memorized, the impromptu, and the extemporaneous. Now we're going to talk a little bit about these. Their definitions are in your textbooks, so if you're not remembering them, please do go back and look. First, we're going to talk about manuscript speaking. This is the kind of speech that you've probably done before if you had to give presentations in high school, or if you gave a valedictorian speech or something like that. You wrote down a speech and then you read it from a piece of paper. You're also probably familiar with how very, very boring these can be. Now, these do show up in public life. We do see manuscript speaking in American public address. For example, the presidential State of the Union address is usually a manuscript speech. Commencement speakers, convocation speakers here at Georgia College usually give manuscript presentations. They've written everything down. If you're familiar with ecumenical or orthodox homilies and sermons within the Christian tradition, those often tend to be manuscript speeches. In this class, the stories that you're going to tell today, the 100-word stories, the toast that you'll give or introduction that you'll give at the end of the semester, that last speech, and then several other assignments will ask you to create manuscripts. However, there's something interesting about these. Manuscript speeches are designed for things where every word is vital. Think about a presidential State of the Union. What happens if you're introducing a new policy and you get a detail wrong? Imagine we were having someone introduce a new policy for a $4 million stimulus package given to a particular organization, and they accidentally said $4 billion with a B. That would not go over well, would it? American political life is premised on fighting about details, understanding how very particular details of something have huge effects on the American public. That's why we rely on experts. That's why we study things. And so having manuscript speeches makes sense when every word is important. Commencement speakers and convocation speakers have incredibly stringent time limits. They are often given exactly X minutes and X seconds that they are allowed to speak. Therefore, they need to know exactly what they're going to say in order to be able to say it effectively in the given time. In the same way, ecumenical and orthodox ministers are often deeply concerned about issues of particular theology, ways of thinking about their understanding of God, and therefore it's vitally important to them that every word is accurate. So we do see these types of public speaking in public life. The second type is memorized speaking, and you will rarely see memorization in public life. That seems weird, right? Wouldn't it seem easier to just memorize what you have to say and say it really well and then come back? You've probably done this before in some of your own speeches. Basically memorized everything. How well did it work? Did you have it all memorized perfectly, or did you maybe forget something? That's because memorized public speaking is something that is generally acontextual. What does that mean? It means it's without context. And without context, a human mind can't memorize very much. We need connections. We need to be able to memorize things the way that you would memorize a script in theater, as interaction, as movement, as performance. And memorizing any more than maybe an anecdote or an introduction or a joke is going to tax your brain often beyond what it can do. And so we rarely find memorized speaking in American public life. Impromptu speaking, however, is something that we see often. Impromptu speaking is when someone is a bit prepared and is generally expected to know about their topic and then answer things on the fly, answering press questions if you're a press secretary for someone, a student asking questions, a teacher answering questions, a boss or employee. Those are all times when we'll find impromptu public speaking. Sharing stories at an open mic, such as a wake or a retirement party, a birthday or anniversary celebration. Sharing those stories will often be something that is impromptu. You're telling a story about a person you loved or cared about or respected. You don't sit down and make an outline. You just tell the story to the greatest extent of your truth. This was also found in Quaker preaching. So if you're familiar with Quaker tradition in the United States, most of you probably won't be, but if you are, their preaching is impromptu. And this brings us to something interesting. Why impromptu for something like preaching? It's because the person is expected to know. Quaker theology says that the Holy Spirit, they believe in a spirit that will teach people what they need to know, and then they will share that as their story, personal revelation of God. And so that's what we're talking about with impromptu speaking, someone who knows what they're talking about. It relies on everyone believing your expertise in the subject you're discussing. And the final one is extemporaneous speaking. This is a picture of a young Susan B. Anthony, and I share her picture because she was one of the most famous American extemporaneous speakers. This is also the most important form of public speaking in American culture. It's also my favorite. It's what I wrote my dissertation on. Susan B. Anthony was the subject. Extemporaneous speaking is one of those things that's near and dear to my heart. Maybe because I do it every day. So let's talk a little bit about extemporaneous speaking because this is the method that you need to master for this class. American culture of public speaking revolves around the idea of the citizen. That a good citizen in a democratic republic, what we are, and a good citizen is going to be able to persuade and understand, does not need to resort to violence to get what they want. They can instead persuade. And so our speaking culture has grown up around the idea of being able to persuade people for the good of the nation. And that means our practice of public speaking requires that we be able to connect with audiences, various audiences around the country and around the world. If I'm a politician and I want something to happen, I have to be able to persuade my constituents. I have to be able to persuade the other nations, the other politicians that my ideas are the right ideas. And that means I need to be able to make those decisions and make those arguments with each audience. The practice of public speaking also comes from religion in America, where people need to be able to persuade others that their religion is the right choice. We don't have a state-sponsored religion. You are not forced to declare a religion in order to be an American citizen. Instead, each person gets to choose. And that means ministers, people who run churches or mosques or whoever else, have to be able to persuade people to become members of their faith group. And so that practice of public speaking centered around the audience means there are two big concepts that we need to focus on when we're considering public speaking in an American context. The first is invention, and the second is delivery. So let's talk about those a little bit. Invention is the practice of coming up with ideas to meet your audience's needs. Now, this does not mean imagination or pretend or creation. Invention instead is taking what is, the facts in front of you, your experiences, real life as you see it, and putting together a solution that helps people. Think of it like Henry Ford inventing a better engine to work in cars. Think of it like Thomas Edison inventing a better way to communicate across long distances. There was a problem and there was already stuff in the world. They just put it together in new and interesting ways. That's what you do when you are inventing in public speaking. You put together the stuff that already exists, the stories of your life, the truth of scientific data, the historical research that you've done, and you put it together in a way specifically to meet this audience's needs. And then you deliver it. Delivery must meet the needs and expectations of the audience, occasion, and context. We will come back to audience, occasion, and context all throughout this semester, so keep those in mind. But delivery asks you to be able to shape the way you say those invented pieces of information to the people standing in front of you. And as you know, in America, nobody's going to force you to stand in front of a particular speaker and listen to them speak. The speaker always has to gain the audience's attention. And what that means is your delivery, the way you stand and deliver, the way you use language to bring people into your ideas, is absolutely key to understanding each other and connecting your ideas.